Uh, First of all, I'd like to thank Ari and his team for their warmth and generosity for inviting me and my family to this important event. Uh, when Ben first approached me about coming to LA, I have to admit I was more than a little bit distracted. I had been advocating for humanitarian aid for Ukraine and struggling to understand the passing of an American budget that denied support to a country and its people who were dying every day to defend democratic values that seem so deeply connected to who we are and what it means to be American. And then, of course, October 7th happened. Like everyone else, it took me a minute to get my bearings. I don't know if enough time will ever pass for me to completely accept that any human being is capable of the impossible horrors I was seeing and hearing coming out of Israel. As more time passed and more hate poured into my social media accounts over my support or lack of support for Ukraine, Israel, and Palestine, it occurred to me just how profoundly polarized this world has become. How we have allowed algorithms designed to categorize and divide us for the purposes of marketing to completely disconnect us from the shared values and moral imperatives that by design should bind us together. Tzelem Elohim, Tikkun Olam, and the value of a word that is exactly the same whether you say it in Hebrew or Arabic, Chaim, life. In my opinion, one of the more tragic results of tribalism and our addiction to social media is that we have allowed misinformation and disinformation to separate us so profoundly from rational thinking that the opinion of a celebrity in the size of their social media following is somehow as worthy of our attention as the actions of a 22-year-old medic in southern Israel who throws her body into the line of fire to protect the people she loves. Or for that matter, a Palestinian doctor who refuses to abandon his hospital and the patients he cares for. Unfortunately, this is the situation we find ourselves in. And so I thought the only opinion I have that might be worth expressing to all of you here tonight is how grateful I am to be receiving this award. And how important I think it is to talk about being Jewish. Growing up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood on the Lower East Side of New York, I can't say I really related that much to being Jewish. My mother did her best. I remember her telling me that Jews were the chosen people. Like every other Jewish mother, she had a list of luminaries she would pull from: Albert Einstein, Sandy Koufax, Yasha Heifetz, Carole King, to try and convince me that Jews were the best at everything. The fact that we were on welfare and living in a squat without any hot water or electricity never made me feel particularly chosen. And judging from my report cards, it seemed highly unlikely that I was ever going to be the best at anything. What I did relate to, though, was my grandfather. And anyone who knows me knows that everything I am, every role I've ever played, every script I've ever written, was in one way or another an extension of my desire to know and be known by my grandfather. But Alex wasn't exactly a typical Jew either. He wasn't particularly observant, he didn't speak Hebrew, and worst of all, he loved hockey. In fact, with his clothes on, the only thing that really gave him away was that he played the cello and hated everything German. On a side note, years later, when my older brother Jamie married a German woman, Alex pulled a complete 180 and started buying Heineken as a symbol of his newfound appreciation for German culture. I never had the heart to tell him Heineken was Dutch. But every spring, my grandfather would have a Seder, and my entire fractious family would gather in his tiny apartment on Washington Place and become impossibly drunk as we reminded ourselves of the bittersweet flavor of being Jewish. I remember my brothers and I fighting over the Afikomen and poking each other with forks as the grown-ups argued over the Haggadah and which passages were most important to read. I always loved that the whole thing kicked off with a massive argument, a rabbinical debate about what day creation actually occurred. And then the questions asked by a child. I know it sounds weird, but this is actually what I love about being Jewish. That questions and debate are at the heart of Jewish thinking, as if truth and its constant need for calibration were a matter of life and death, because it is. But it's also the deepest possible connection we can make as human beings, because all we need is something to agree on, and I can't imagine anything better to agree on than the truth. That's what it means to me to be Jewish. To question, to wrestle. In fact, it's the meaning of the name Israel, to wrestle with God. To feel our way through life and wrestle with uncertainty in order to arrive at the truth, because that's what matters, the truth. Last week, a friend of mine shared an old Hasidic quote with me that took my breath away. There's nothing so whole as a broken heart. It seems to me that maybe that's what's being asked of each of us right now. To think and to act with a broken heart. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage CCFP co-founder and worldwide executive and president of Music of Electronic Arts, Liev Schreiber.